Hello, good morning, Year 8, and welcome to your sixth lesson on the Haitian Revolution. We are drawing towards a conclusion. The action is hotting up as Toussaint Louverture's army of former slaves has strengthened their grip on the colony of Saint-Domingue, which he has declared himself the governor of after his alliance with Sontonax and the French government. But then things start to change in 1799. In 1799, this man here, Napoleon Bonaparte, becomes the leader of France. He was one of their most successful generals, and he wants to make a few changes in the years to come. In fact, in his own words, he wants to turn back the clock in Saint-Domingue. I'm just going to read you an extract from a letter that he wrote to one of his most trusted generals, a guy called Charles Leclerc. Napoleon said, "The existence of a black republic is equally disturbing to the Spanish, the English, and the Americans. It is to the common advantage of all Europeans to destroy this rebellion of the blacks." Very different tone in his words to Sontonax, who was much more in favor of keeping the former slaves on side to fight against the Spanish and the English. What I want you to do for your first activity is have a go at these two questions. First one is, why might Napoleon have thought that a black republic was a disturbing idea? Why would he? So just think in your own way about things that could have made him worried about the idea or disturbed by the idea of an independent black republic in the Caribbean. Secondly, why did he think the other European countries were equally disturbed by the idea? Remember, France had been at war for going on 6 years or so with Spain, Britain, Austria, all the other major European nations, and now he's pushing towards some sort of European friendship again. So it's interesting. Why do you think he said that about the other European countries? So pause the video and answer that question, please. So these are our learning intentions today. We're going to re-examine the events leading up to the Haitian Revolution, leading up to his invasion. Number two, we're going to try to explain the reasons why Napoleon decided to launch an invasion of Haiti in 1801. And finally, understand the events of the initial invasion. And so a quick recap of the events so far in Haiti, as it was known, Saint-Domingue, 1789 to 1801. It all began with the French Revolution in 1789, which then led to demands for greater equality, first by the free colours, people like Raymond, if you remember, from lesson 3, and people like Vincent Auger, who we looked at briefly 2 lessons before, demanding greater equality for the free colours. They didn't get it, and so they began a civil war with the Grand Blancs, and while this was going on, the enslaved Africans began their own uprising. Fourth, Spain and Britain invaded the island in an attempt to actually weaken revolutionary France. They expanded their war, not just out of Europe, but to the Caribbean. And next one, fifth one, Sontonax is sent to convince the enslaved to sign up and fight with France, and then he unilaterally abolishes slavery on the island. This leads Toussaint to join the French and lead armies of enslaved Africans in defense of French interests. Next, Toussaint and Sontonax force all the remaining British and Spanish forces to leave the island, and for 4 years, between 1797 and 1801, Toussaint is essentially the main French commander and the governor of Haiti. He's becoming more and more powerful in the eyes of some. He started to see himself as an independent ruler, and it seemed like he was close to declaring independence for Saint-Domingue, which is why Napoleon decided to invade the island to overthrow Toussaint and restore slavery. So, the question is, why did Napoleon order the invasion of Saint-Domingue? Okay, these are some reasons here, some of the most interesting ones. Napoleon was sympathetic to the Grand Blanc, the rich white slave owners, because his wife was the daughter of a very famous Grand Blanc. Her name was Josephine, and she convinced him that the maintenance of slavery on Saint-Domingue was essential for France's overall success in the world. A few other factors there, and a key one is that Britain and France signed the peace treaty in 1802, which meant that Napoleon could worry about other things. What I'd like you to do is to go to the folder in week 6. Open up this file, Why did Napoleon order the invasion? It should be labeled lesson number 6. There are 6 key factors there. They correspond with these 6 factors. Yeah, I want you to read through them, and then I want you in one color to highlight whatever. So these are the reasons why Napoleon invaded Saint-Domingue rather, and in one color highlight things that are to do with Napoleon's desires and needs and France's desires and needs, and then in another color highlight things which are to do with a fear of Toussaint's growing power. So those are the 2 big factors that are at play in this decision. So just get the highlighter out. One color you might put, okay, there we are. So that would be here, as you can see, a fear of Toussaint's growing power, and so forth, until you have all of them done. Okay. So 2 key factors. Why was resistance to Napoleon's 1801 invasion limited at first? So just to give you a brief overview, Napoleon sends a very large expedition led by a man called Charles Leclerc, and 20,000 of his very best soldiers. And their goal is to retake the island. But first, what they have to do is they have to ensure that the large and formerly enslaved army will not fight with Toussaint and will trust the French. And one way they do that is by denying that their intention is to re-enslave the population. They give the impression that they're going to give more freedoms, that they will be nicer to the formerly enslaved than Toussaint has been, because Toussaint was faced with a large problem. In order to maintain his large army and to get the economy of Saint-Domingue up and running again, he needed to get the sugar plantations growing again and producing sugar, and the coffee plantations producing coffee for export. The system that produced all of these cash crops relied on slavery, and they hadn't thought of another way of doing this. So he started to introduce new labor laws that regulated how people worked, which forced people to stay in one area, which used to be their former plantation of the former slaves, and they had to work a certain number of days. They were given very small plots of land in return for this, but not enough to live on, and many of them complained that the conditions that Toussaint introduced were quite close to slavery. What the French also did to undermine Toussaint is they started to speak to some of his commanders and gave the impression that he was becoming too powerful. He was going to force them all away from any decisions, and that the French would treat them better. So they tried to alienate him. And so initially, when Napoleon's invasion force comes in, there isn't much resistance to it. But this starts to change as their intentions become clear. So what I want you to do is to have a read through of all of these factors and then answer these 4 questions in detail in your books, please. And then I'm just going to set you off with one last task, and that is I want you to research this man. He is probably the second most important man in the story of the Haitian Revolution. His name is Jean-Jacques Dessalines, and he was the first leader of an independent Haiti. Yes, that's true. Toussaint does not survive 1802. He is tricked into a meeting with Leclerc. He sits down and he realizes that it was a trap. They kidnap him and they send him to France, where he is imprisoned for a number of months before he dies, probably of pneumonia, in a very cold French prison cell. Lots of reasons why the very careful and usually very clever Toussaint fell for what seems to us like an obvious trick, but he probably started to believe that he was untouchable by that point, which is a shame. So have a look through these statements, answer the questions, and then when you're done that, you can take your time before next lesson. Just create a quick fact file on Jean-Jacques Dessalines. Good luck.